Time to meet the wizard.
Those were up, and they did.
More smarts, and my...
He told me enough!
No, I.
Here's Chuck!
Hey everyone, it's Don G. Corleone here, and I'm here with a brand new movie review. And this movie review is going to be for the 14th film of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and it's the 14th film of the Infinity Saga, and it also introduces us to yet another new character, and the very first wizard-like character and characters of the MCU, and that's going to be 2016's Doctor Strange, directed by Scott Derrickson. So what's the plot? Well, Marvel's Doctor Strange follows the story of talented neurosurgeon Dr. Stephen Strange, who after a tragic car accident must put ego aside and learn the secrets of a hidden world of mysticism and alternate dimensions. Based in New York City's Greenwich Village, Doctor Strange must act as an intermediary between the real world and what lies beyond, utilizing a vast array of metaphysical abilities and artificial artifacts to protect the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So how was this made? Well, a film based on the Marvel Comics character Doctor Strange was initially listed as being developed at New World Pictures, with the scripts dated January 21st, 1986 by Bob Gale, which never went further into production. By 1989, Oz Cox had written a script for Doctor Strange co-creator Stan Lee. The script had the character traveling to a fourth dimension before facing the villain Dormammu on Easter Island, Chile. And a film using this script was almost made by Regency, but the company's films were distributed by Warner Brothers at the time, which was in a dispute with Marvel over merchandising. And around this time, producer Charles Band optioned the property from Marvel and began developing a film at Studio Full Moon Entertainment. However, the option expired before production could begin, and the project was reworked into the 1992 film Dr. Mordred, whose title or character bore similarities to Doctor Strange. By December 1992, Wes Craven had signed to write and direct Doctor Strange for release in either 1994 or 1995 with Savary Pictures distributing. Then 1995, David S. Goyer completed the script for the film. By April 1997, Columbia Pictures had purchased the film rights, and Jeff Welch was working on a new screenplay with Bernie Bilstein and Brad Gray producing. But then by April 2000, Columbia dropped Doctor Strange, who then had Michael France attached to write a script and interest from Chuck Russell and Stephen Norrington to direct from A.K. Blade fame. By June 2001, Dimension Films acquired the film rights, with Goyer back on board as writer and director. Goyer hinted scheduling conflicts might ensue with the film adaptation of Murder Mysteries, and promised not to be highly dependent on computer-generated imagery. Then by August 2001, Miramax acquired the film rights from Dimension, and by March 2002, Goyer had dropped out of the project. A 2005 release date was then announced in the next March, and while in June 2004, the script still had yet to be written, and Marvel Studios CEO Avi Arad stated that they were nowhere with that. It was a tough one to write, but they were working on it, and they were trying to find the real Jerry Garcia of the writing community. Then in April 2005, Paramount Pictures acquired Doctor Strange from Miramax as part of Marvel Studios' attempt to independently produce their own films. And at the time, the film was projected to have a budget of no more than $165 million. In 2007, Guillermo del Toro and Neil Gaiman pitched a version of the film to Marvel, with Gaiman writing and del Toro directing. Another version would have seen the character be alcoholic and a disbarred physician in the late 1920s or early 1930s, and he would have been living in Greenwich Village for 90 years without aging, and it would have been heavily inspired by the artist Steve Ditko. Gaiman was especially interested in introducing the character Clea, but the studio was not interested. And as years went on, to March 2009, as Marvel was doing their own films independently, Marvel hired writers to help come up with the creative ideas to launch its lesser-known properties, including Doctor Strange. And in June 2010, Marvel Studios hired Thomas Dean Donnelly and Joshua Oppenheimer to write Doctor Strange, while promoting Transformers Dark of the Moon in April 2011. Actor Patrick Dempsey indicated he was lobbying to play the title character, which never happened. Then in January 2013, Marvel Studios President Kevin Feige confirmed Doctor Strange would appear in some capacity as part of Phase 3 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Then Feige then reiterated that a Doctor Strange feature film was in development at Marvel Studios that May, and again in November. And in February 2014, The Hollywood Reporter wrote that Marvel is considering Mark Andrews, Jonathan Levine, Nicole Gage Arcel and Dean Izzarelli to direct the film. It was considering Jonathan Eibel and Glenn Berger to rewrite the film's script. Feige denied this report, but confirmed that Marvel is considering prospective candidates. Then by March, Marvel is considering Andrews, Levine, and Scott Derrickson to direct the film. And we all know Scott Derrickson ended up directing the project in the end. So after the film was shot and marketed, Doctor Strange had its world premiere in Hong Kong on October 13, 2016, and was released in the United States on November 4th as part of Phase 3 of the MCU. At the box office, the movie grossed over $677 million worldwide and was met with praise for its cast, visual effects, and musical score. And the film received an Academy Award nomination, typically, for Best Visual Effects. Then we all know a sequel was released last year in May 2022. Who cares? As for my reaction, well, I never knew the character of Strange when I saw the trailers and posters for this film, so I knew nothing about it, and I ended up missing this one in theaters. So I didn't really see this one until it hit home media. After I did see this one, I thought it was enjoyably good. Sure, not one of Marvel's best, but still good nonetheless. And around the time, Scott Derrickson was not really one of my favorite directors because we all know he did some movies like Day of the Year So 2008, which sucked. Sinister 2012, which I thought was sucked and boring. Yeah, everyone's saying, one of the scariest movies ever made. Pfft, what movie did you guys fucking watch when you watched Sinister? You clearly watched something else. But thankfully, this movie actually really made him a better director. And then you all know last year he went and directed, he thankfully dodged a bullet, not coming back for the sequel, to go direct an actually good horror movie, The Black Phone. And now he's going to direct a segment in the new upcoming VHS film, VHS 85, and his segment is actually already complete. So I hope when it comes to certain VHS segments, I hope his does not end up being among the most boring and ends up actually being among the few best. So I can hope it can join that rank, because I'm already liking Scott Derrickson as a director so far. And personally, I find that every time I watch Doctor Strange, I kind of enjoy it slightly more than I did before, especially compared to the MCU now. I suppose it just came down to the belief that Doctor Strange is far more rooted in reality than many other Marvel movies. Whereas many others have storylines that audiences and humanity in general cannot exactly relate to, Doctor Strange follows a man who loses his way after a bad car accident. Stephen Strange finds that he's unable to continue his work as a surgeon and essentially spirals into despair. He eventually finds salvation in the mystic arts, finally understanding that the world does not revolve around him and becoming involved in a battle to save Earth. And in terms of Marvel stories, that's fairly simplistic. And the movie starts off with a scene that's both darker and funnier than most of a lot of Marvel films, and it sets the tone really well, and actually manages to carry that all the way through. It's comedic, and yet it maintains a level of urgency or threat to the entire situation that characters constantly find themselves in, keeping the audience intrigued for most of the entire duration. And in the opening scene, we get our newest Marvel Studios logo, where it shows certain clips from the movies and shots of the characters, the logo we're familiar with today, so I loved that. That was a great new logo to use, and it's been better ever since. And the special effects are probably the biggest selling point of the movie. The effects are pretty trippy, for lack of a better word. That's really what I am going to say about them. Wasn't sure they always made sense in the context of the movie, but they're still pretty cool. The character of Stephen Strange is pretty fleshed out and realistic to an extent. He becomes an engaging character over the course of the film, with some faults and just as much charm. He is a fun character. He was a fun character anyways. And I get the feeling, and in fact, basically the entire cast seems to be having a jolly little time making the movie, and that's just the air of fun of surrounding it. And the writing is actually pretty good, with dialogue that comes expected of a particular character, and a plot driven in a direction that makes sense and ceases to be boring. And I never find myself questioning a character's decisions due to pure stupidity, nor do I find myself dozing off sometimes, like during some of the more badder MCU movies. It manages to build an intriguing world without revealing too much or boring the audience with lore and exposition. It gives us enough to keep us interested. Doctor Strange is definitely not a perfect film, but to me it was a thoroughly enjoyable one, and is one of Marvel's, and was definitely one of the good Marvel films. Let's begin with the things that, from the personal opinion, of course, just don't really work. Now Rachel McAdams does a good job for what she has as the love interest Claire, but the character is just kind of underused and underwritten this time. Her screen time was just not large, and her development was sketchy at best. At times, compared to some of the other love interests of the MCU who actually have some better screen time and have better roles. Strange mastering magic does happen too fast, but but I don't really buy just how rushed that aspect was. And while there's a lot of fun and witty moments, a few jokes felt random and out of place, times like most of the MCU movies. But the cast, once again, is definitely a major asset. Like, I did have reservations about McAdams' character, but not her performance. Benedict Cumberbatch does really make a perfect title character his own and knocks out of the park. The standard of the rest of the cast is Tilda Swinton, like wonderfully mysterious, is the film's most interesting character and played with relish by her. And Chidwell's elf, LG4 has a charismatic intensity. Benedict Wong has fun and I enjoyed his chemistry with Cumberbatch. In fact, like, Benedict Wong became one of the best MCU sidekicks after this movie as A.K. Wong. Like, he doesn't have much of a huge role except really, like, just helping Stephen Strange, and had a good role in Endgame summoning all the characters, but he's still one of the best MCU sidekicks, I can admit that. And I do think that the villain Calisius could have been explored in more depth, but Mads Mikkelsen is intriguingly menacing. And this story, making the most of a great innovative concept, is never dull and is told with absorbing atmosphere, exuberance, and very rarely sacrifices coherence or credibility. And there are some really interesting ideas here, explored with thought-provoking intelligence. The action excites and thrills, as well as being visually stunning. Instead of being drawn out, even through quite long, the climax is great fun to watch. And Doctor Strange's script even has emotion, like wit and tension. And although he doesn't have the character growth one would like, Strange is a well-realized character, and Cumberbatch has a lot to thank for that. And the music score has some great intensity, rousing excitement and nuance, and Scott Derrickson clearly engaged hugely with the material here. And another thing here, too. This is actually, believe it or not, the very first time the MCU goes into sorcery. So it's finally about time the MCU we have some sorcery, direct utilization of magical energy for combat, discussion of other dimensions too, even traveling between them at will. And Doctor Strange's final outfit is just wicked cool. Like, if you obviously know the character from Marvel Comics, then you'll know that he's pretty damn powerful here. But unfortunately, no, we all know this is an origins film and that's it. He reveals how Doctor Strange became Doctor Strange and his Sorcerer Supreme. And aware of his brilliance, Cumberbatch gives Strange a comedic line of arrogance, which are handled well by Cumberbatch with the grit of Strange having to find superpowers to save his own life, and losing his eyes for CGI specs, and Mads Mikkelsen still finds space to get his teeth into to boost performance as Caecilius. Can't announce the villain's name, guys, it's hard to pronounce. And while Tilda Swinton gets into the mystical groove as Strange teaches the Ancient One, and keeping links in the Marvel Cinematic Universe limited to an end credit scene, like the screenplay by co-writer and director Scott Derrickson rolls out a fizzy mix of martial arts action and shiny comic book origin magic. And while the ending does feel a little bit abrupt and Strange's ex being pushed to the sidelines, the writers make the flaws ones easy to forgive, and thanks to Strange New psychedelic world giving comic origins a refreshing spin. And bringing magic into Marvel flicks, director Derrickson and cinematographer Ben Davis present a spectacular kaleidoscope world, seamlessly looping real locations with overlapping CGI that superbly alters the real-world appearance. When it comes to story direction, cinematography, effects, and the film's not particularly groundbreaking, and Doctor Strange's arc isn't something not seen in many other Marvel films, and doesn't hold too many surprises, but the script is still generally good. And I would say once again, though, the villains do seem a bit underwritten, and they lack much dialogue and character. And whilst the villains are underwritten, the opposite is true for the heroes. Now, there's some great dialogue for Cumberbatch and Swinton, like more on the performance. And Marvel is also good at getting the tone of the film right, between humor and seriousness, and again, they succeeded with this film. There are several laugh-out-loud moments, like not as much as Guardians of the Galaxy, which I guess is for the best, because technically the stuff on Earth isn't really meant to be too much laugh-out-loud, or wasn't supposed to be too much laugh out loud anyways, but enough to be enjoyable. And the serious moments have enough gravitas to forward the storyline and make you wonder if everything is just what it seems. And yeah, director Scott Derrickson does a good job at directing, and Ben Davis' cinematography is great. Doctor Strange is very much an effects film. It must be hard to do cinematography for a film like this. The effects are very important to this film, and generally they are very good. Good too. I didn't see this in theaters, so I watched it in 2D, since I did not see this in theaters, but I have a feeling they must have been better designed for 3D, because this can feel like a conflict of interest and does lose something in translation, but even then, it doesn't hugely harm the film. And while Mads Mikkelsen was a pretty decent villain, he unfortunately isn't given enough to really bring his character to life, which is a shame. The character is kind of a little understated, which is a pity, as he is pretty much another exceptional actor here with what he was given. Marvel often just don't quite get their villains right, and unfortunately, This is once again the case in Doctor Strange. And during this time of the movie, Scott Adkins has been doing some good with a lot of roles, and even playing that big henchman in big movies, or the main henchman in big movies. Unfortunately, the character here is just completely underdeveloped and could have been much better. He's slightly much better than Noah John McFor, though. What he does bring to this character is martial arts skills, which whilst again being slightly wasted and used enough to create a good action scene in the film. The action does dazzle, like a mix of Star Trek's action-pounding thrills and humor in the strangest places with a dash the visuals wonder of 2001: A Space Odyssey for good measure. Like, it often must be said that it's not often at all that I would compare a Marvel blockbuster to one of Kubrick's masterpieces. Marvel once again just defies expectations with this film, and for once a film in their universe does not climax as a gigantic blue laser beaming up into the sky. And yes, the consequences of the battle may be earth-shattering, but the film is too steeped in its lore and characters to be formulaic in its approach to the slightest. It borrows off Inception without feeling like a ripoff and mixes up the Marvel formula just enough to ensure that a feeling you've seen this all too often before, not once, not even for a fleeting second, steeps into the picture. DC could learn a trick or two from Marvel, or perhaps they may need to if they are to ensure they were needed to ensure their survival, but sadly they couldn't really, because Warner Brothers had to rush everything. They didn't. And Scott Derrickson is, to be sure, seemed like to be a strange choice for the project, because considering that most of his films just weren't that well received before this, because the majority of films we know he did at the helm were horrors, and none taken that all to be kindly by critics, and one sci-fi remake that was horribly received by critics. But based on his work on Doctor Strange, it should be a primer that more things would come, like intelligence, craftsmanship, and action handled with rare skill and offering up sympathy for its characters. That's pretty much exactly what we got with the Black Phone here. Because, thankfully, it was a good thing he didn't come back for the sequel. Because I don't think the sequel could have been saved under his helm. And I don't blame Sam Raimi for the sequel, guys. I blame Disney and Kevin Feige for ruining what clearly Sam Raimi could have planned without their involvements. I feel like without their interferences, Sam Raimi could have made a pretty kick-ass sequel. And what I was glad here is that this one holds up, because this movie actually holds some importance to the MCU, because this is the last movie to introduce us to an Infinity Stone. Okay, the last movie to have an Infinity Stone play the role, because one certain Infinity Stone had to be saved for Infinity War, but this, of course, was the Time Stone, which serves as the Stone of Time. And Doctor Strange doesn't believe in religion and mysticism. This is Doctor Strange is kind of forced to question his beliefs here, but it's done in a way where there are logic explanations behind it, and they're dealing with multiverses and time travel in a believable way. And that's just one of the two things I love. And it feels like it's borrowing a lot of visuals from Inception. It's crazy and the effects are well done here. And the film does go heavy with CGI, but it looks great. So, and I do like we get introduced to the Time Stone here. And pretty much Doctor Strange ends up becoming the protector of the Time Stone here. And also, there's a post-credit scene in this movie that actually teases Thor Ragnarok, because we show Doctor Strange meeting Thor, and Thor has that big glass of beer like that scene in Ragnarok, so it was a great way to show what else was going to come next for both characters. So it was also nice to see Thor again after he was missing since Age of Ultron, that brief cameo scene. However, I will say there's definitely some bad qualities with the film. First of all, the storyline. Now, yeah, the backstory for Doctor Strange was interesting, but it was after he stopped being a surgeon when things began to get odd. It is often too common for movies to not explain their stories because there are things you don't understand, but in movies like The Matrix, that line is used to evoke mystery and keep the audience engaged. I found that in this particular film, this was a tactic used by the writers to not have to explain their own story that they wrote. It gave me the feeling that they conjured up a great storyline for a great film, but they were unable to think of what the characters were actually doing in the film, and it was not really explained what the characters were doing. It was just all of a sudden that Doctor Strange could conjure up a gold weapon that they had to fight people who wanted to ruin the world for no particular reason, and ended up concluding the film using time travel, another tactic used for easy endings. I am all for time travel movies. Films like Back to the Future are some of my favorite films of all time, but time in this film just does not work for me sometimes, and time can be used to solve all the film's plot issues and does not require any creativity to do so, and just felt that messing with time in this film was not done cleverly. It was just simply done to conclude a complex plot. And my next big gripe is with the music of the movie. Now, Tony So from Every Frame of Painting did a fantastic video discussing the Marvel Symphonic Universe, where he puts a challenge to a bunch of people to sing a single original composition from a Marvel movie. No one could do it, and after watching Doctor Strange, I once again, no one would really be able to sing a melody from its soundtrack. And the movie plays it safe with its music, though. When excitement is happening, generally exciting music is playing. When something sad happens, generic soft, sad music is playing, and so on forth. And finally, to the visual effects. And yes, there are unusual, and one feels like this is where a movie's creators wanted to get people to write the reviews saying, like, this was a refreshing take on the MCU. While the CGI is spectacular, unfortunately, I can never quite get over the fact that these are a bunch of actors running on a treadmill in a green room towards a CGI portal that they really should have created 2 meters away rather than 100 m, and they would have escaped danger easily. The action sequences are frenetic and heavily edited, with seemingly multiple cuts a second, and keeping track of where characters are in space and time is impossible. But to be fair to this movie, that's kind of the effect they were going for. And some of the visuals could rightly be compared to Inception, like I've said before. I want to assume the visual effects designers took a lot of inspiration from that movie, and scenes of people fighting inside rotating hallways just felt more real in Nolan's movie. Perhaps because they were just filmed in a real rotating hallway, the social imperfections in the actors' movements through the hallways and the way the light falls on surfaces that just can't be matched by computer-generated images. The human eye and brain could always even tell the difference, though. However, despite those bad qualities, I enjoyed Doctor Strange as one of the more enjoyable MCU films and a good introduction to the sorcerers of the MCU. In the end, Doctor Strange is another movie that's worth watching and buying for all MCU fans. For those who want to see a more unique kind of character that sadly got fucked over in the future and see wizards in the MCU. Anyways, because yeah, Doctor Strange had a good introduction here, but unfortunately, after Endgame, he got fucked over. Like, in No Way Home, they made him kind of a jerk, because he doesn't understand the whole point of redemption at all, and just wants to straight up kill the Spider-Man villains, thinking it'll save everything and solve everything. And he can't really even take on 3 teenagers. And then in Multiverse of Madness, they made him weak and a complete moron as well. Infinity War and Endgame, the last time he was useful was Infinity War and Endgame. Mostly Infinity War. He had a bigger role in Infinity War, but yeah. And once again, he did start off a bit unlikable in this beginning of the movie, but after he got his powers, he starts to develop better as a character at least, but it's like the MCU just forgot about that, but yeah, whatever. Once again, those who want to see wizards in the MCU and want to see a new character get introduced, this is worth watching and buying. Anyways, that's it for my review of Doctor Strange. Wondering how I'm going to rank Doctor Strange? Here's how I'm going to rank this movie. So overall, if you love wizards and Marvel and want to see those combined, then I highly recommend watching this movie and buying it and adding it to your collection for sure. And if you're wondering how I'm going to rank Doctor Strange, I'm going to give Doctor Strange a 7.5 out of 10. There we go. There wraps up my review for Doctor Strange. So the next review of the MCU is going to be, well, we are going back to what is pretty much set during Phase 2. And we're going to go back to outer space and meet the very team from outer space that is known for taking on cosmic threats. Yeah, Guardians of the Galaxy 2 is the next review of the MCU. But until then, guys, that'll be it for this video. Thank y'all for watching. Like this one to see more. And don't forget to like, subscribe to Don G. Corleone.